Okay. My notif said OBS is reconnecting. Oh no. Hold on. I'm not sure if I have to reshare my stuff, but I will keep on talking anyway. So, he said that, I quote, ang kasaysayan ay mga salaysay na may saysay sa mga taong, oh my god, wait, everyone got disconnected. I have to redo it. Oh no. Let me do that again. Oh no. Hello? Hello. I don't know what's going on, why I got disconnected. Okay, there we are. We're back. Okay, what was I saying? He told us about what history is, and he said, ang kasaysayan ay mga salaysay na may saysay sa mga taong pinagsasalaysayan nito. In English, history are stories that have meaning to those people to whom history is being told to. And for me, that made a really big impact, because before it was just some names, some dates that I have to memorize, things that have no connection to me. And it is really sad, because history at its core is there to make us remember things, make us not forget and do the same mistakes that we have done in the past. And it's just sad to see that as soon as we forget it, the past, well, it seems like it is repeating itself. But no, really, it's just that it's not that history repeats itself. It's that people repeat history through ignorance and willful forgetfulness. And so we are here. We're going to read history from the beginning. And we are going to start with this book, The Philippines, a past revisited from the Spanish colonization to the Second World War by Renato Constantino. I'm not going to read the table of contents anymore, but I think it is important to read the preface, because one thing about history is that you should know about the background of the people who wrote it. Because if there is one thing that the BBM supporters are right about, it is that history is biased. And when I say history is biased, it's not that, oh, they're editing it to make the Anglos look good and the Marcoses look bad. It's just that whatever type of history it is, it was written by the winners. History is written by winners, always. Because, you know, if you lose a war, you're never gonna get to write the history for the people. However, it is still important, even if it is always biased, because we have no other sources that are more reliable than published history books. Because although we can say that books and history are always biased, you should also know that these books will not be just published and distributed without other people criticizing what is in there, you know? So fact checking is a thing. Especially for published books. Your book cannot get published if it's just full of trash because your publisher will have to read it. They will have an editor for you. Anyway, so yeah, what was I saying? I keep on getting sidetracked. Oh, I was saying that we should know about the authors of the books we are reading because it tells us a lot about what type of things we are about to read, what is the mindset, where are these things coming from. So we are going to start with the preface. Okay, I'm going to start now, and hold on, I think we should. All right. In recent years, quite a number of scholars have come out with specialized studies on different areas of Philippine history. The authors of these books, brochures, articles, and research projects examined primary and original sources and distilled the results of previous efforts. I am indebted to them for many an insight into past events, but to my knowledge, no basic framework has so far been advanced which would incorporate these fresh findings into a new view of Philippine history. My work is an attempt in this direction. It is the purpose of this book to make the past reusable for present tasks and future goals. I have relied for the facts on these specialized studies as well as on the general histories. I make no claims to new findings, only new interpretations. The Filipino reader may find it somewhat surprising that I have chosen to use the word native up to chapter 9 to refer to the indigenous inhabitants of the Philippines. I trust that they will in this instance discard any pejorative associations attached to the term. It serves merely as a convenient designation until that period in history when the word Filipino can be used in its correct context, which is when an emerging nation appropriated for itself a name which used to apply only to Philippine-born Spaniards. In other words, I began to use Filipino only when the Filipino people started to think of themselves as such. Okay, before we continue reading this, I would just like to note that, yes, back then the word native has a little bit of a negative connotation. It's like an insult. But Constantino chose this word because before we thought of ourselves as Filipinos, the word used for us by the Spanish was Indios. And the word Filipino existed, but it was not for us. It was for those Spanish people whose parents came here and they were born here. So they were the ones who were considered Filipinos, but we as a nation took the word back and applied it to ourselves. Let's continue. The reader will note that all foreign words, and these include those in the local dialects, are italicized only in first use. Part of the research work for this book was undertaken while I was directing the History Series project of the Lopez Foundation, and until my resignation from the Lopez Museum, I would like to acknowledge the assistance of the researchers then employed by the foundation and the staff of the Lopez Museum. Okay, let's read the small text here. I am indebted to a number of academic colleagues, particularly Dr. Lilia H. Chung, for their assistance in verifying and tracing source materials not available in the Philippines. Like my previous books, this one may be termed a family undertaking. My son and his wife spent many hours in the periodical sections of Manila libraries digging up material on the period from 1920 to 1941. My daughter and my son-in-law did research on clerical institutions, and prepared the index. Above all, this book is another offspring of a lifetime of scholarly collaboration with my wife, who, besides contributing to the research, the organization of material, and the editing, gave me the benefit of her usual perceptive and unsparing criticism. As my collaborator in this work, she deserves as much as I do, whatever credit it may win. All shortcomings are my responsibility alone. Renato Constantino, Quezon City, December 27, 1974. So that was the year this book was written. There is a part two to this book, and that one is actually a joint effort between Renato Constantino and Leticia R. Constantino. I'm not really sure if Leticia is his wife or the wife of his son, but I'm guessing it's his wife. Let's go to part one. Liberation Transformed. Towards a People's History. Are you ready, my ducklings? Okay, let us start. Decades have passed since Filipino historians felt the initial impulse to rewrite Philippine history from the point of view of the Filipino. The discovery that some accepted facts of history were actually apocryphal to the growing realization that certain foreign sources, which used to be the staple of history books, were flawed by bias. And during periods of nationalist ferment, the Filipinos' own heightened awareness of their separate national identity. All these spurred recurring attempts to revisit the past. More recently, the intensified thrust of nationalist forces in Philippine society projected the necessity of establishing a new framework of Philippine history. I'm not really sure if this is where the tripartite view of history, Philippine history came from, but there are two separate schools of thought when it comes to Philippine history. Okay, I'm gonna discuss it quickly, just in case it is not discussed in this book. So, the traditional view on history is a bipartite view. It is that before we were emancipated as a people, we were colonized, right? So, it is a darkness versus the light. The darkness meaning the times where we were under the rule of a foreign country. And then the era of light is the time where we were free, which is not a long time compared to the time that we are actually colonized, but yes. So that is the old view. The newer and rather preferred view for me, I prefer this one, is the tripartite view. It divides our history into three. We have light, darkness, and light. So what is the light, darkness, and light? It is similar to the first view, wherein the darkness is the part where we are colonized. But before that, we must remember that we were a free people. We were not colonized from the beginning. We had culture and history before that. And I think it is hard to actually make this the mainstream view or belief, because not a lot of our pre-colonial history has survived, as a lot of the things that we are as a people have been demonized when the Spaniards came and the priests started making the babaylans witches, the anitos demons, and basically anything that was unchristian, quote unquote, was rebranded as something that is evil. So if it is branded as evil, it is harder for us as a people to actually appreciate those things as part of our culture, because we are a very deeply ingrained Christian nation. Sometimes a lot of us still think that way. Okay, let us now continue to colonial scholarship. By training, Filipino historians were captives of Spanish and American historiography, both of which inevitably viewed Philippine history through the prism of their own prejudices. Responding to the need to write Philippine history from the point of view of the people, some of these scholars valiantly tried to transcend the limitations of their training. They deserve full credit for their many revelations and corrections of historical misconceptions. But in the main, while they made important contributions toward liberating Filipino minds from the burdensome legacy of clerical scholarship by correcting certain biases carried over from the Spanish period, they retained strong survivals of American colonial historiography. So, yes, since it's not just the Spanish that colonized us, there's also a strong American bias. So, a lot of these scholars, although they can already see that, oh, these are Spanish biases, these are not true, they couldn't see back then that, oh, we also have our own biases because we were colonized by America, and America bought the Philippines from Spain, which seems like they were liberating us, but they were not. So they were still colonized even if they think they were free. I hate saying that, but that was the truth. These historians refuted the more blatant defamations of the Filipinos and highlighted the abuses of Spanish phraseology. Okay, what is phraseology? It's a government that is running under the rule of friars, of Spanish priests. Because back then, what they say, what the Spanish friars say, are the rules. Okay, let's continue. Spanish and clerical rule were placed in better perspective. This initial success did not, however, extend to the correction of the prejudices nor the blasting of the myths that were implanted by early American scholarship. Much remains to be reassessed as regards the American colonialists who still come in for a great deal of undeserved credit. Moreover, reacting to the almost exclusive concentration on Spanish concerns of earlier colonial historiography, some scholars tend toward the opposite extreme and themselves dismiss an entire epoch of history on the ground that it was a history of Spaniards. While it is true that a Filipino history need not bother itself with matters that affected only the Spaniards, Spanish colonial policy from the beginning, and indeed even certain aspects of Spanish history and society, had profound effects of the evolving Filipino society and cannot therefore be ignored. Okay? So, in here, Constantino is explaining how back then, before this book was published, although we have realized that the Spanish are like mostly the ones writing our history and they're trying to write their own history, they did not realize that they're giving the Americans too much credit. Because back then we saw the Americans as sort of our saviors from 333 Spanish rule and years of Spanish rule, but it's kind of, well, we can see the results now. A lot of us still think that America is great, even if it's not that great. You can quote me on that. And it's how we learned, our public school education. It was patterned on them. That's why, when we learn, we always think A is for apple. We don't learn the ABC thinking A is abanico. It's always A for apple. And that is something to ponder about. And in their hatred of the Spanish rule, they have disregarded a lot of things that are kind of related to us, although not directly Philippine history. But when you study history, you don't just recite the things that happened. You must give context. And in this case, by hating the Spanish so much, a lot of historians remove the context, which is the rules, the laws, and other things that are happening in Spain, which could explain why these other things that are happening in here in the Philippines were happening. Okay, let me just take a sip of my coffee. Are you still there, my dear ducklings? Are you with me? All right, let us continue. So, other scholars demonstrated their nationalism by projecting the heroic deeds of recognized heroes and idealizing other national leaders. They failed to perceive that to give history a nationalist perspective, the role some of these men played should have been critically scrutinized and evaluated. The failure to do this had the effect, perhaps unintended but nonetheless unfortunate, of propagating other myths and abetting the illusion that history is the work of heroes and great men. Still, others have concentrated their efforts on contemporary events. So much effort has been directed towards the recording of the latest possible history that the need to reassess the past has been neglected, with the unfortunate result that critical areas of official history have remained fundamentally unchallenged. More recently, the nationalist pressures on Filipino scholars generated a number of specialized studies that exposed some of the myths about Philippine-American relations. Their impact was, however, limited since the work of these scholars was still undertaken primarily in the interest of objectivity and for this reason did not fall within the framework of an essentially liberating scholarship. In other words, the task of correcting historical misimpressions was not pursued as part of a total effort to remove the fetters of the Filipino mind that had been forged by colonial education. Nevertheless, some of these specialized studies have provided fresh insights into specific periods or aspects of our past. There is danger, however, that the increasing depth of historian specialization may become the means for escaping a reality too complex for his comprehension. Immersed in particularities, some lose sight of the general dimensions of history. Others, though presenting a general history, occupy themselves with recording a plethora of particularities without discovering their unifying thread. Okay. And we go to the next part, which is the task at hand. But beyond writing Philippine history from the point of view of the Filipino, the task is to advance the writing of a truly Filipino history, the history of the Filipino people. This means that the principal focus must be on the anonymous masses of individuals and on the social forces generated by their collective lives and struggles. For history, though it is commonly defined as the story of man, it is not the story of man, the individual, but man, the collective. That is associated man. Without society, there can be no history, and there are no societies without men. So before we continue, I would just like to discuss 2 points. The first one is the one earlier. I didn't really stop to discuss it, but Constantino said that we tend to make heroes out of the people who fought for our liberties, which, in my opinion, yes, they are, but at the same time, we put them in such a great pedestal to the point that we didn't really put a lot of effort into criticizing anything they do, which is why we have heroes such as Emilio Aguinaldo, who has done a lot of sketchy shit, like getting at least two other heroes I know assassinated. So if you didn't watch, what movie was that? The one with John Arcilia. Anyone in the chat, does anyone remember that movie with John Arcilia as the hero, the one where he says where he curses a lot? What's the name of the national hero? I forgot. It's so early in the morning for me. I woke up at 10. Anyway, so long story short, he got Andres Bonifacio and General Luna killed because he viewed them as a threat, politically and ideologically, and these things were not really taught when we were younger. And because of that, we view these people as, oh, they were such great men, they can do nothing wrong, superheroes, blah blah blah. And that is not really a good thing. It's okay to thank them for the things that they've done for our country, but time and time again, we must realize that these are also men. They are not infallible. There are things that they do that are, sketchy. And I think that is still a lesson that we need to learn today. We are doing the same thing over and over again. And instead of heroes, we do it to politicians. Instead of realizing, oh, they're doing their jobs, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they did this and that, and you're still whining about it. You're so ungrateful. When in fact, our mindset should be, well, we are paying our taxes. We are paying these people so that they do these things. This is basically their job. Do you thank your doctors? Like, thank you for diagnosing me? I bet the fuck not. Because that's their job. You paid them to diagnose you. Although it would be nice to thank them, at the same time, you don't revere them as a living deity. But that's what we do to these politicians and these heroes. What's wrong with us? Okay, let us continue. Oh, what's the other thing that I wanted to talk about? Oh yeah, the second thing is that in here you would see the definition of history that I was talking about. It is written for and by the people who it is talking about. So history is valid mostly when it is written for and by the people whose stories are written in that history. So we cannot really have Philippine history written by colonists, because they will have their own biases. They will not understand the context where our culture is coming from. So the best person to interpret our history is also Filipino historians. But sadly, as we were educated by colonists, the bias is still there. Okay, let us continue. Where were we? Man alone. Man, the individual, could never have become human except in association with other men. Man interacts with nature and with other men through the intervening reality of society. Without society, he would have remained like other animals, unable to consciously change his environment or himself. It was in cooperative work that men first became human, and this cooperative effort is what produced society. But cooperation is an exigency of struggle against nature and against social forces. Men must work together to fight natural or social forces stronger than their individual selves. Struggle is therefore the essence of life, whether of an individual or a society. An individual has no history apart from society, and society is the historical product of people in struggle. Human society is the cause and the result of people in motion and in constant struggle to realize the human potential, for the human being is the only species that has unlimited possibilities of development. Okay? Motivators of history. Okay, let's just move. History then is the recorded struggle of people for ever increasing freedom and for newer and higher realizations of the human person. But the struggle is a collective one, and as such involves a mass of human beings who are therefore the motivators of change and of history. History is not merely a chronology of events. Like I said earlier, it is not just, things that happened in order. That is not history. It is not the story of heroes and great men. Essentially, history consists of the people's efforts to attain a better life. The common people possess the capacity to make history. In fact, the historic initiative of the masses has time and again produced social cataclysms that have changed the world. This could be familiar to you. Initiative of the masses that produce something big. EDSA, anyone? Historic struggles provide the people with lessons in their upward march and give form and strength to the constantly changing society. In studying these struggles, a true people's history discovers the laws of social development, delineates the continuities and discontinuities in a moving society, records the behavior of classes, uncovers the myths that have distorted thought, and brings out the innate heroism and wisdom of the masses. Such a history, therefore, constitutes both a guide and a weapon in the unremitting struggle for greater freedom and the attainment of a better society. Since the mass of humanity is still in a state of poverty and ignorance, I'm sad to say that 50 years later, it's still the same. Since a few nations have attained advancement and development at the cost of consigning others to underdevelopment, that has hitherto been regarded as history is predominantly a conscious record of the rich and the powerful, but by no means the just and the correct. The people should also have their history, for they have made history through their participation in mass actions, resulting in the unfolding of the social forms that seek to realize their goals. So you see, you and I also have participated in history. If you voted in this election, you participated, you made history. If you are a minor and have not yet voted, but you have voiced your opinions on the candidates, their history, and their viability to become leaders, you also participated in history. It is a mass action. It is not just about the people or the main characters in this story. You are also a character in history. Okay. But in the recorded pages of history, they have remained in the background, as if they had played only a negligible role. It is to those who rule who have their names and exploits emblazoned on these pages. The people have been taken for granted and their role has been minimized or even denied. And you can actually see this in effect these days. Because of this, for having the people's role minimized and denied in history, a lot of us think that whatever happens, it has nothing to do with us. That whatever happens to the country, to the national government, your life still solely depends on you. We are very individualistic that way. But you see, it is not the case. What we do, what we say has a lot to do with our history, the history that is still being written as we speak. Let's read further. The inarticulate in history. Oh, hello, barrels. We are just in page 4. We are just discussing how history was written back then, and just to summarize things, Constantino has been saying that history before this certain book, which is basically a reinterpretation of history back then, is that it is either written from the Spanish point of view, or even if it was written by Filipinos, it was sadly very, very heavily biased. For we were educated by the Americans back then, so their biases became our biases, and a lot of us have been disconnected from history because we have seen history as something that was made by heroes, leaders. We have disregarded the role that the common person plays. And I was saying that even today, this is a problem. 50 years from when this book was written, we are still doing the same thing. We think that, it has nothing to do with me. It's just the elections. Whatever happens to my life is my own doing, and whatever happens to the country, I can still manage on my own. But that is not the case. That's simply not true, because history is not just famous men. History is made by the common man, the common person, the person on the streets, the person on the voting precinct, the person on the internet shouting out their beliefs or giving out false narratives. So let's continue. The inarticulate in history. The individuals who made history colorful could not have made history without the people. Supermen may exist in romantic minds or among those who persist in the primitive practice of deifying men. Like I said earlier, we deify people. Not a good thing. Not a good thing, my dear ducklings. But no supermen exist. Only leaders who became great because they were working with and for the people. Emphasis on with. The various changes in society and the upward climb of civilization could not have been possible without the people playing definite and irreplaceable roles in each epoch. We marvel at the pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China, the Parthenon of Greece. It was the labor of millions of slaves that gave the great thinkers of ancient civilizations the leisure and the facilities to conceive of these wonders. It was the labor of other millions that turned conception into reality. The French Revolution, my absolute fucking favorite, and the American War of Independence involved masses of human beings who fought, suffered, and died to win the victories for which their leaders were remembered, positively or negatively, most of the time posthumously. The advances of society, the advent of civilizations, the great artistic works were all inspired and made possible by the people who were the mainsprings. Hold on. My light is flickering. I don't know if it's my light bulb going out or is there a ghost. It doesn't matter as long as the ghost shut up and let me finish my reading. By the people who were the mainsprings of activity and the producers of the wealth of societies, but their deeds have rarely been recorded because they were inarticulate. It is true that inarticulate or silent individuals cannot have their deeds recorded in history. However, their collective effort can and should be chronicled and given its deserved importance. But since the articulate, having assumed the responsibility and the privilege of writing history, have done so from their point of view, the resulting account presents an incomplete and distorted picture which unduly projects individual men while disregarding the dynamic role of the masses. Most of the names that crowd the annals of recorded history are those of men who during certain periods held power over the people, or who, because the people were behind them, were able to perform deeds of such historic magnitude as to deserve remembrance. The institutions and the personalities that history correctly celebrates were in a real sense products of the people's efforts. All powerful leaders, and especially the tyrants, exerted efforts to ensure that the history of their time would be written in their image. Their subjective attitudes were a dominant influence in the recording of events. But as people gained knowledge and as societies progressed, some individuals who were hitherto regarded as heroes began to lose their relevance. Others were unmasked as villains who stood against the interests of the people. For in the final analysis, it is the people who make or unmake heroes. They are the ultimate judge of an individual's role in history. It is only within the context of a people's history that individuals, events, and institutions can be correctly appraised. In a people's history, individuals, events, and institutions as particularities will be seen in their proper perspective within the generality of a historical process, and only then will these particularities be fully understood. At the same time, only by correctly understanding these particularities will the general patterns of the evolving history of the people be fully comprehended. The general and the particular constitute a dialectical relationship, an accurate perception of which deepens the study of the history of a people. A people's history, therefore, has to be general in order to serve as a concrete guide for understanding a developing society. But this generality is achieved only by the discovery of the interrelationship of particularities. Redressing the imbalance. Okay, let us continue. If you're wondering why I kind of sound different. Oh, thank you, Magindara, for the hydrate and the stretch. Let me just hydrate with coffee. We are now at Addressing the imbalance, page, I think this is page 5, although it says page 17 on my copy. The struggle for national liberation of the peoples of underdeveloped areas has enriched the literature of history and has been responsible for new approaches, new techniques of viewing events and writing history as a reaction to the official histories which have been part of the arsenal of colonialists in perpetuating the backward conditions of their colonies. So, as you can see, history is a tool. It is an important tool because colonists have used our history to make us believe certain things. For example, some people are saying that Rizal is our national hero and not Bonifacio because the Americans approve of Rizal more. Why? Because Rizal is seen as more of a pacifist and Aguinaldo is a revolutionary who used violence to solve the issue. And that is something that they do not want because they are also colonists. They do not want the Filipino people to revolt against them. They want us to think that, oh, Rizal's way is the right way because he is the national hero, the greatest among them all. So, although I still do love Rizal so much, love him to pieces, even if he is a fuckboy, it's just something that we need to think about. It's been a debate, even in academia, like who should be seen as the national hero, Rizal or Bonifacio, a pacifist who used his pen or a revolutionary who used his sword. So I will not be giving you like a final take on that because who am I? I'm just your regular MILF Bakunawa reading you the history book. Let's continue reading. Okay, let's continue. Philippine historians can contribute to this important stream of thought by revisiting the Philippine past to eliminate distortions imposed by colonial scholarship and to redress the imbalance inherent in conventional historiography by projecting the role of the people. This work is a modest attempt in this direction. It does not lay claim to being a real people's history, although the process of demythologizing Philippine history and exposing certain events and individuals is part of the initial work toward restoring history to the people. In pursuance of this task, the present work may appear to overstress certain betrayals and may seem to exaggerate the importance of certain events while paying scant attention to others customarily emphasized. This is necessary today in the face of still predominantly colonial view of our past. Now, do you think as a people we have achieved what Constantino has been trying to do to decolonize our history? Because personally, although I think it has been greatly, well, not greatly, but a lot of people are like doing the good work of trying to decolonizing our history, I still think that it's still too deeply embedded in our culture. Well, because they have attacked us, well, not physically, but they have done something that is really hard to undo, which is to colonize us through our religion and education, two things that are really, really hard to get out of the system. And so their ways of thinking are still embedded in the deepest pits of our souls as a nation. So you can still see a lot of the colonized beliefs. A lot of our parents still think, oh, don't do this or do that. That is like, that is the work of the devil, work of the demon. When in fact, the things that they're saying that are work of the demon have been part of our history before the colonizers came, right? Like, anitos, and like basically trying to talk to or worshiping ancestors, something like that. That has been around for a very, very long time. But try to summon your ancestors in front of your very Christian mom. They would say that, oh, don't do that. That's the work of the devil. You're not supposed to do it. Why? Because we are a deeply Christian country. And why do we still think that expressing our opinions is something that is bad? It's not just the Marcoses that have done this to us, like made us quiet people. It's been because this type of mentality has been passed down from the Spanish era. You're not supposed to talk, but because if you talk, you'll get punished. You're not supposed to talk against the friars, and then later on, you're not supposed to say anything bad against the Americans or the Japanese, because that's how you die. And later on, because of that very, very suppressed type of attitude, we also let it happen to us under the hands of our fellow countrymen, these politicians, because we have this very, very deeply misguided way of thinking that, oh, they are in power, so therefore they must be right. Where do you think did that come from? Yes, it's from 333 years of colonization under the Spanish, because they're in power, they are right, because if they're not right and we talk about it, we will get punished, we will get killed. Because maybe you don't know it, but back then our societies are more equal. Women are not as repressed as they are today, and a lot of the concepts that we are talking about, that we think are the things that happened in the past, are not really what they seem to be. So, for example, the terms timawa and maharlika. We used to, a lot of us think that maharlika is such a wonderful word, royalty, but it means exactly the same as timawa. When we think of the word timawa as something negative, we use it to describe someone who is it's usually used for people who are hungry and greedy or poor. But these two words mean exactly the same thing, just in different places. So, maharlika is a Luzon term, so it's for the Tagalogs, while timawa is the term used in Visayas, but they are virtually the same class. So, yes, a lot of misinformations. Hi, hello, Urza. Yes, my stream is late because I woke up at 7 a.m. and I thought, hey, maybe I should take a little nap because, what is 1 hour more of sleep? And then I woke up at 10. Anyway. Yes, we are going now to continue. And Magindara is right. We got colonized super early and we don't really have a cohesive Philippine identity before that, which again, this makes for a lot of division. It's because we are an archipelago, many, many different islands with many, many different subcultures. And so it's just human nature that when we don't understand something, we either worship it or hate it. And in this case, we hate the people that are different from us. That's why you can see up until today, there are people who are racist against fellow Filipinos. So if you go to like Manila area, they use the term Bisaya as if something it is negative. Whereas if you're elsewhere, like you're in Visayas or Mindanao, they would refuse to talk to you in Filipino, in Tagalog, even if they know how to, because They think that, oh, you're in their place, you should talk to them in Visaya or English, because they refuse to, you know, accept Filipino as a national language because it is highly based on Tagalog, which is from Luzon. Now, I myself am from Luzon, but my only problem with Visayans is that I don't have one in my mouth right now. Thank you. I'm going to continue to read. Where was I? Let's go to limitations and a beginning. To obtain a comprehensive knowledge of the activities of the masses in each period of our history will require painstaking examination of documents and all available records, including folklore, as well as inspired deduction. And speaking of folklore, Magindara over here has a regular, I think it is monthly, a folklore stream. Yes, a discussion. And I am also planning to discuss the history of the Bakunawa folklore. You know, not just tell you the story. I would tell you the story, the predominant one, but also we are going to examine the other stories that are similar to it to try to trace its roots. Did someone call for Bisaya people? Yes, it is I. Anyway, where was I? It's 11:30. It's not too early to make semi-sexual jokes anymore. So yes, I will not retract what I said earlier. My only problem with Visayan people is that I don't have one in my mouth right now. Thank you. Anyway, where was I? An arduous task, it is nevertheless possible considering what anthropologists and archaeologists have been able to do with societies long dead. But since such a history will surely take decades of study, it must be postponed to a period when social conditions will afford scholars a luxury of spending years on this investigation. The immediate concern of the times is for work that can present in a practical way not just the side of the Filipinos, but the side of the Filipino masses. So, you might be wondering what's the difference when we say Filipino masses. It must be from the side of the common man, not the Filipinos whose names are written in the history books, because again, the names that we see, they are leaders, they are quote unquote heroes, but they are not the only ones who are responsible for history. History is something made by men, a lot of men, the common men. Hold on, where are we? I keep on losing where I am in my everything. Even if the study uses only the same sources open to traditional and official history, a new outlook can help to open the door towards a real people's history. The need for a real people's history becomes more urgent as Filipinos research for truly Filipino solutions to Filipino problems. As it is, we habitually analyze Philippine society in the light of colonial myths and foreign concepts and values, and act on the basis of assumptions and premises that only reveal our lack of understanding of the rich experiences contained in our history of struggles for freedom. History, for most of us, is a melange of facts and dates, personalities and events, in a mixture of hero worship and empty homiletics about our national identity and our tutelage in democracy. History appears as a segmented documentation of events that occurred in the past without any unifying thread, without continuity save that of chronology, without clear interrelation with the present. So again, we are trying to what's the term? I don't know. Try to reconstruct our history through this book. Because again, for those who were not here earlier, the thing that I still remember after how many years from my first history class that I appreciated, it's the definition of Philippine history. Ang kasaysayan ay mga salaysay mula sa mga taong pinagsasalaysayan nito para sa mga taong pinagsasalaysayan nito. History is a collection of stories of the people, by the people, and for the people it's being read to or told to. So history must be written from our point of view, since it is about us anyway. Let us continue. I think I have rice stuck on my esophagus because I'm trying to eat. Yes, we must contextualize. You are correct, Barrels. Because history without context, or with the context that are foreign to us, is just a story. It means nothing to us. Thank you, Urza. I am hydrating with coffee. I actually have my breakfast in front of me, but so far I only have shoved in one spoonful. Because instead of taking breaks when I'm not talking, I'm drinking coffee. So you can hear me, I'm actually chewing my breakfast right now. So we are now here rediscovering the past. A people's history must rediscover the past in order to make it reusable. It is the task of the historian to weave particular events into a total view so that historical experience can be summed up and analyzed. Such a history can then serve as a guide to present and succeeding generations in the continuing struggle for change. Such a history must deal with the past with a view to explaining the present. It must therefore be not only descriptive, but also analytical. It must deal not only with objective developments, but also bring the discussion to the realm of value judgments. Okay, so value judgments. If you are, I mean, I don't think a lot of you would be studying education, but assigning value to something is one of the highest forms of learning. I will not really I'm not going to really discuss Bloom's taxonomy, but you must know that applying judging the value of things is the highest form of learning them. And I think that is something that we lack a lot in our history education in general as a country, because we are stuck on the basic level, which is memorizing. We keep on memorizing things without analyzing them. Okay, let's continue. In our particular case, history should show how a nation was born where previously there was none, and how the society that emerged suffered drastic changes and continues to change despite the apparent continuity that impresses the superficial observer. It must seek to uncover the emerging forces concealed by prevailing myths and obstructed by the forces of reaction. A history that serves as a guide to the people in perceiving present its reality is itself a liberating factor. For when the present is illuminated by a comprehension of the past, it is that much easier for the people to grasp the direction of their development, and identify the forces that impede real progress. I want to highlight this part because it is very much applicable to our situation today as a people. Our present is currently uncertain, mostly because a lot of us were not really educated well in the past. And even if we think we are, we have learned it, we didn't really understand the gravity of the past, which is why you can see a lot of these kids would be like, move on na kayo, or past is past. Girl, can you say the same thing to me if your mother got raped, your father got killed? Move on ka na. So, you see, it has a different way to it if it becomes personal. And that's something that we are missing as a nation, as educators. We are failing the children by not letting them know or not letting them see how this affects people, real people. History is not a dead thing. And sigh of anyway, where are we? By projecting the people's aspirations, a people's history can give us the proper perspective that will enable us to formulate the correct policies for the future, liberated from outmoded concepts based on colonial values and serving only the needs of foreign powers. And what frustrates me is that because we lack this for a very, very long time, the current people who are distorting our history right now is using this. They know that the people don't understand history. It was decontextualized. Now they're giving it context, the wrong context. And therefore, the people think that, oh, I feel strongly about this because there is context now. I finally understand it. Even if said context is fabricated, distorted. Just giving them the feeling of, oh, this is something connected to me. Because, was it Aristotle or Socrates who gave us the 3 ways of convincing people? Pathos, logos, and ethos. History is all just memorization, logos, and ethos. But pathos, where? Appeal to emotion, where? We cannot appeal to emotion if we decontextualize things. We are removing history from the people, which what history is about. That's why the people don't think it's important to them. And when someone comes along and tries to give them context for it, albeit wrong, they latch onto it. That's what's happening to us. Given the narrative of my lolo or lola said this, oh, it must be true because it's connected to you. And since I know you, it must be connected to me as well. Let's continue. In our particular case, history should show how... Okay, I already went through that. Okay, the unifying thread. Objective developments in a society carry with them the formation of a subjective factor which becomes instrumental in realizing further developments. Consciousness interacts with material life. The superstructures that emerge are the totality of institutions, laws, customs, and prejudices that correspond to the economic structure of society. Yes, Urza, giving sentimental value to things, that is also part of it. Because we don't really care about history if it is not related to us, right? Like, for example, when I was a kid, I didn't really care about history, but I was really interested in this certain hero because his last name is, it's not exactly the same as my last name, but our last name has been like changed here and there, but they're all related. We are all with the same family. And I know for a fact that this person is blood related to me. So I was like very, very interested in him. So, as you said, there is sentimental value. We can also say that about this thing, whatever the fuck this thing that is happening to our country right now. Because, no, to one example, there's this old lady saying that, oh, when I was a kid, I used to eat this damn bread with my sister, and I used to ask for hers because I liked it so much. It has sentimental value to her. That is why he voted for that person, because she missed that fucking bread without contextualizing it. Why was that bread made? Who made it? It was made by USAID to combat the severe malnutrition of the Filipino children. Why are they malnourished? Did she bother thinking about that? Why are the people malnourished? Because we were very fucking poor. We were so poor because the people who were in power were abusing their power to take advantage of the money that was supposed to go to the people for their own luxury. That's why there was a famine in Negros and a lot of people died because of hunger. That is why the USAID went here and gave us the fucking Nutriban. Putang ina. Can you feel my anger? That's why they gave us Nutriban. And what did these people do? They accepted the fucking Nutriban and plastered Jabba the Hutt's face or name there. And now the people think that, oh, it is made by the Marcoses for the people. It's Bakunawa sounds of frustration. Let me get my shit together. Maganda, sampalin ko sila tapos move on sila. Exactly, right? If it didn't happen to them, move on. That's why most people don't really get it. If you give them, yes, exactly, they wouldn't understand the numbers. You have to contextualize, give meaning to the numbers. There should be an emotional value, right? Yes. Let's read, like how Filipino parents force their kids to medicine instead of other jobs. Yes. Frustrating. Let me just get my shit together. My head is out there. Okay. Though the ideas of the dominant classes predominate at any given period, they are not the only one that exists. Inevitably, dissenting ideas emerge to coexist with the dominant ones and come into confrontation with them when the economic contradictions that they reflect have sharpened to a critical degree. Now, let's dissect this part. So, it is saying that dominant classes' ideas, or the ideas that come from the rich and the powerful, although they are dominant, they're not the only ones that are there. The views, the ideas that are dissenting or contradicting them are also there, and they will be battling against each other when the economic contradictions that they reflect, okay, when shit hits the fan, people will realize that, hey, maybe we were wrong about things. Thus, economic struggles are often fought as political and intellectual battles. The various revolts that broke out in the Philippines constituted practice which changed not only circumstances but man himself. These struggles were the schools of the masses. Their quantitative occurrence as localized or regional actions led to a qualitative change, the birth of a nation. From blind response to foreign oppression, mass actions against the Spaniards and later the Americans underwent various transformations until they finally became a conscious struggle for national liberation. While these struggles took place on various levels of understanding, they developed in the participants a deeper and more intense comprehension of the nature of their society and of the changing forms of their struggle. Okay, I would like to take a moment to emphasize certain things in here. So, the struggles took place on various levels of understanding. Now, this is something that our side should understand as well, that we can't really just explain things from our own understanding. We must know where the other people are coming from. Everyone understands differently, but we can come into an agreement if we try to see things their way. Because let's say, for example, the revolts that led to the Spanish being, ousted from the Philippines, blah, blah, blah. Not everyone has the same understanding of it. The people who are the rich ones, the ones who are able to go to Spain and other countries, they don't have the same level of understanding as those who are on the ground, the people who were fighting because they were physically being hurt or killed. The main issue of the richer people was that, we want to be a nation, we want freedom, we want to decide for our own selves, while the people who were on the lower ranks of society, their main issue was like, we don't want to be oppressed anymore. We want to be treated as people because they were treated very badly. So you see, they have different concerns, different levels of understanding as well. And that is why there are different approaches to it. So some of them want to be, what do you call this? A province of Spain, while the others want a total separation from them. Same thing applies today. We all have our different concerns, but if we want to try to convince people, we need to contextualize. Context not on our terms, but context on their terms. What matters to them? How does this affect them? Like I said, like I always tell my friends and my snail, emotional manipulation is not a bad thing at all times. Sometimes you use emotional manipulation for the greater good. Of course, I am kidding. For all intents and purposes, for all legal intents and purposes, I am kidding. But yes, take away from that what you want to. I will continue reading. Despite the tremendous obstacles that Spanish and American colonialism created by their subtle operations in the consciousness of the Filipinos, ever higher levels of political and economic awareness were being achieved in struggle, at least among some sectors of the population. Let's go to the motive force. This rich tradition of struggle has become a motive force of Philippine history. Participation in mass actions raises the level of consciousness of the masses. Mass actions include protests, my dear ducklings. So if you think that these protesters are terrorists, They do nothing for the society. I will need you to take a big pill of shut the fuck up because they are doing something. They are raising the level of consciousness of the masses because some of the people are not aware of the concerns they are bringing forth. So even if the higher ups don't do anything about it immediately, just the fact that they are there, people can see them, there is media coverage, they are increasing awareness. They are letting more people know. And the more that the people know about the concerns, the faster we can achieve something. The more conscious they are, the more they become active, see? And the more telling their contribution to the changing society and the changing of their own attitudes until they come to realize that struggle is their historic right. And it alone can make them free. I will repeat, struggle is our historic right, and it alone can make us free. The people's history of the Philippines must trace the continuity of the people's material and subjective growth. The unifying and divisive force of colonialism must be seen in the responses of the people through struggle. There must be no segmentation of the different stages of our history. The continuity, despite the evolution and disappearance of forms of social life and institutions, must be shown first in the appearance of a nation which was both the product of Spanish colonialism and its very antithesis, and then in the transformation of that nation under American colonialism. Let me just drink my coffee. Have you seen how Filipino parents get hysterical when their child wants to enter into the world of art, make a career on it? I know, right? Chocolate made a joke about it in one of his shows, and it really stuck with me. Yes, it's really hard to tell your parents that you want to get into art because they are already in this outdated mindset that you cannot make money from art. Honey, that's where they're wrong. If you work hard enough, if you are, if you persevere about it, you can make money from art. Look at all these artists, LTD artists, riggers, and many other types of artists. They are actually earning mainly from art, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that parents think that, art is unstable because it's basically no one is employing you. You are self-employed, and they find that to be not conventional because they are from an era where you take a job when you were 20 and then you stick with it for the rest of your life, and then you get pension or whatever. What they fail to realize is that nowadays, even if you are hired by a big company, the economy is not stable as they think it is. That company, no matter how big it is, can, just go poof in the wave of a hand. They can be bankrupt. Yes, maganda raw for all intents and purposes. This is a joke. Yes, like our current government. It's a big fucking circus. NSFW artists make money in art because of obvious things. Yes, if you want money in art, just accept a lot of furry art, fetish art, because not everyone can do it. So supply and demand, bitches. Right? Rigging is so fucking expensive. That's why I'm just going to rig my own L2D model, because although technically I can afford it, I don't want to. I don't want to invest a big chunk of my savings into it without the assurance of getting a return. and like I'm preparing for something. I'm suspiciously suspiciously wealthy furries. You know what? For all the flack the furries are getting, they are single-handedly giving funds to our artists. So more power to them. Wherever they're getting their money from, I don't even care about that. Support our artists, especially our local artists. I've seen a lot of posts about our local artists commissions going real bonkers lately because of what happened politically, and people don't want any part in that. And that's one thing that I wanted to say, because people say that, oh, I don't understand why they're doing this. Why are they, why are they stopping with their commissions? It's not like we are doing anything. It's exactly the same thing that happened to Russia, because people are comparing our situation to Ukraine. So they're like, why are they doing this to us? Why is it that when it was Ukraine, they were helping the people? But because, honey, they don't see us as Ukraine. They're seeing us as Russia. Because what happened is that we collectively, as a people, 31 million of us, have elected the son of our late dictator. So they think a lot of people here in the Philippines are supporters of fascists, and they don't want anything to do with that. And although I think that it is, like generalizing is not a good thing in this case, we can't really say that it is an idiotic thing to do, because he won by a landslide. It's a lot of people, and to them it's like, oh, if you put down a bowl of M&Ms and tell me that a big percentage of the M&Ms are poisoned, would I still take M&Ms from that same bowl, even if I know that there are M&Ms that are not poisoned? For safety, I would not eat those M&Ms, right? So that's their line of thinking. I'm not justifying it. I'm just explaining, this is what they're thinking. It's not really that outrageous of a logic for what they're doing. But I still think that, let's support our local artists. They need it more than ever. Because, yeah. So, also, even before all these started, I only commission Filipino artists because I think they need more credit. A lot of them are very, very talented. A lot of them are underpaid. They are undervaluing their work, especially on Facebook. If you see the prices there, they are ridiculously low. And you can see that their clientele do not value them, because every time I say, oh, you can take your time, they look so fucking shocked. Like, thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me. I'm like, honey, it's art. I don't want to rush art. Or when I give them extra, they're so thankful because they're not used to that. So yeah, commission your local artists, pay them extra, pay them what they deserve. Let me just read some there's some underrated artists. Yes, there are underrated artists who draw sceneries, portraits. People don't like that. Yeah, mostly in the Philippines, if you're not like a VTuber or any sort of creative, the thing that a lot of Filipinos want are portraits, specifically realism. Not a lot of people appreciate other art styles, and the sad thing is that since that is the most common thing and that's what the local clients want, a lot of budding artists are stuck in realism, and they get flack if their art doesn't it doesn't conform to realism. And that's why I don't really interact with a lot of local artist circles, especially on Facebook, because that's all they do. Not that there's anything bad with realism, it's a legitimate art movement, but it's not the only one. Stock market is very emotional. Don't let the dudes in the suits fool you. Stock market, yes. Mopo. Realism. I'm not really that much into realism. Like, I like semi-realistic art, but realism not really my thing. So as you can see, most of the models that I use, it's very very 2D. Like, I don't like much rendering. And when you see my L2D model very very soon, it is actually almost finished. Ling is helping me with my L2D model. It's actually finished, but she is doing some final touches. My L2D model is by Zaypen World, but I guess now Ling is also one of my VTuber mama. She's giving me my eyes, my beautiful eyes. What else is that? Okay, maybe give me like 1 or 2 months. I will be using it, and you'll see that it is highly very very 90s anime shoujo style, because I kind of like flatter colors. Like, there are gradients, but it's not overly rendered. Not that there's anything wrong, it's just a matter of preference. So yeah, where were we? We keep on getting derailed. I talk a lot, and you guys also talk a lot, which is a good match. It's always a great thing to have these types of conversations. Hold on, where were we? Where are we? I forgot where we stopped. So I'm just going to start here. Since mass actions were also responses toward international developments which have their impact in the country, it is also essential to sift world events to find their correlation with local events. Again, contextualization. The liberations which the people endured have been responsible for their awakening, for their growing awareness of the need to really liberate themselves through their own efforts. Each successive generation has contributed to the tradition of struggle, while every stage has widened and deepened the people's understanding of their own powers and their own possibilities. In the history of these struggles, we find certain laws of development which give us a better understanding of reality and which can guide us to higher forms of struggle for the people's cause. A people's history thus unifies past with present experience. Again, a people's history unifies our past with our present experiences. Hold on. I will need to take a very, very quick break because the duendes are being very noisy right now. I need to make them shut the hell up. Just give me 1 minute, my dear ducklings. And we are back. Sorry about that. Let us continue. Oh, say hi to Link for me. Oh, yeah. Sure. Where are we? The only way a history of the Philippines can be Filipino is to write on the basis of the struggles of the people, for in these struggles the Filipino emerged. Filipino resistance to colonial oppression is the unifying thread of Philippine history. And as you can see, this is another thing that we need to emphasize on as a nation today, because our current narrative is that, oh, this person did this and that, that's why it's this and that. They're rich because he was a great, what do you call that? Was he a prosecutor or whatever they're trying to make him as? Anyway, so the focus is on this certain family, which shouldn't be the case, because history is not about two families against each other. History is about the people who suffered, the people who went through the things these families put them through. Let's continue. Oh, we are already in the second part. The first liberation. The Filipino people have had the misfortune of being liberated 4 times. 4 times during their entire history. This is as of writing this book. It's in the 1970s. And that's another thing that you need to note about this book. It was written in the 1970s. And what else?